Hey guys, it's Cece. So in this video I'm going to wrap up the readathon I just did, RYBSAT, which is the Read Your Bookshelf-a-thon, and I'm also going to do my TBR for the next readathon that I'm doing, which is TBR Takedown. So RYBSAT was from May 18th to the 25th, and it was basically supposed to be you pick a place on your shelf and you just read as far as you can. And this was round 5 of RYBSAT. The next one is supposed to be in September or October maybe. I'll put the info for that below. So while I'm wrapping this up, I'm not going to talk about how I felt about the books. I'm just going to talk about what I read on the days I read them, because if I talk about how I felt about the book, that will kind of be stepping on the toes of my May wrap-up, which will be in a few days. So I'm just gonna jump in and tell you what I read. So on day 1, which was May 18th, I was actually on a plane, because the problem with this week is it was my first week back home after school. So I was on a plane, and then I was seeing people, so I didn't get quite as much reading done as I wanted to. But on day 1, on my plane, I started reading Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, which is the first book in the Throne of Glass series. I read 140 pages of that on the plane, and then I got deathly ill, and I couldn't read anymore. So I got 140 pages done of that the first day. On day 2, I was still really sick, plus it was my first day back, so I only read 100 pages, which still wasn't where I wanted to be reading. But then on day 3, I got a lot better. On day 3, I finished Throne of Glass, and I started my new book, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl by Jessie Andrews, which I originally saw on BookTube and was excited to get into reading. And on day 3, I read 215 pages total, split between Throne of Glass and Me and Earl and The Dying Girl. On day 4 was not my best day, but it was my best so far, and I finished Me and Earl and The Dying Girl, plus started the first couple pages of my next book, which was Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas, the second book in the Throne of Glass series. So I read both of those on day 4, a little bit of this on day 4. So I finished about 286 pages on day 4, which was much better than I'd been doing. Yay. The next 3 days after that, on days 5, 6, and 7, I was with friends over the weekend, so I didn't get very much read. So on all 3 of those days together, I read 166 pages of Crown of Midnight. And then my last day was my best day. Day 8, I finished Crown of Midnight, which I'm excited to talk about my wrap-up, and I started my last book, None of the Above by I.W. Gregorio. I can't. So, I read both of those books. So I read 404 pages on my last day of RYBSAT. I got about halfway through this book before midnight struck and I was done. So, yeah. Those are my stats for RYBSAT. I finished 3.5 books and about 1,300 pages, which was awesome and pretty close to what I wanted to get done, so I was really happy about that. Moving on to TBR Takedown, which starts June 1st and goes through June 7th. This readathon is hosted by Shannon at Leaning Lights, which I will link the announcement video below because it's really cool and you still have a few days to prepare. So she also tweeted a suggestion list of 5 types of books that we could read for this. 5 books to read in a week is really ambitious for me, but we can dream. So I'm going to tell you the 5 books that I picked. No promises on whether or not I will actually finish those books. So one of the challenges was read a book that's part of a series on your shelf. And this should shock everyone. I picked Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas, which is the 3rd book in the Throne of Glass series. I loved the 2nd book. I read it really quickly on that last day of RYBSAT because it was amazing. So I'm so excited to get through this, except it's like really thick. It's so beautiful though. And it makes my little paperback copies of the first 2 books look really sad because look how beautiful this big hardcover is. So that's the first book. The next challenge was to read a book that's been on your TBR for over a year, and I definitely had one for this. Will Grayson by John Green and David Levitan. This has been on my TBR for a very long time, well over a year, probably like 2 years. Has it been? It's been on my TBR for a really long time. Anyway, this is one of the only John Green books I haven't read, and it's definitely it'll be my first David Levitan, which is exciting. And I've heard really mixed things about this book. I've either heard it's like really good, I've heard some people say it's really not good at all, so we'll see, but that's book 2. The next one was to read a book from your most recent haul, and I was really excited I got to read this. The Martian by Andy Weir, which I found on BookTube, and I can't wait to read this. I've heard that it's really funny, and it sounds really, really cool, and it sounds really intense, and I feel like I'm going to get through this one really quickly. It's not too long. It doesn't seem too long. The print's fairly, I don't know, like 370 pages, so I'll get through that one fairly quickly. I'm really excited about reading this. So the next 2 books I don't have physical copies of. They're on their way. Hopefully they'll be here in time for TBR Takedown, otherwise we'll have to pick some new books, but the plan is to read these. So the 4th challenge was to pick a book that's out of your comfort zone. And I picked On the Road by Jack Kerouac. This isn't, I don't know if it's necessarily outside of my comfort zone as much as it keeps getting pushed to the bottom of my TBR, and I don't know a ton about it except for how much people talk about On the Road. And so I don't really have an opinion on this. It's probably not something I would normally pick up, so that will be my out of my comfort zone book. Last book challenge is to read the first book in a series. This one's kind of cheating because I don't know that I'll read any of the other books in the series, and actually I didn't know it was a series until I was moving it up on my TBR. But that book is Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I think that's how you say it. I've wanted to read this book for the longest time. I'm so excited that I'm finally going to get to read it. There's almost no way I'm going to be reading it during TBR Takedown, but then it will just go on my June TBR. So I'm very excited about that. And yeah, those are my 5 books for TBR Takedown. I will be updating Twitter, Tumblr, and Goodreads regularly, and there'll probably be some Instagram posts too. I will link all that below so you can kind of keep along with my progress starting June 1st. And I guess I will see you next when I do my May wrap-up in a couple of days. So, see you then. Bye!